evening, everyone, and welcome to night 4 of the 2025 Travel Festival from Rick Steves Europe. I'm Lisa Friend, and as always, I am delighted to be your moderator this evening. Tonight, our show is dedicated to discovering Europe's second cities. And join me in welcoming our hosts for the evening, Gabe, Ben, and Emily. My friends, welcome to the show.
Hello, Lisa. Hello, everybody.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in with us.
Hello.
We are glad to be here with you tonight, enthusing about one of Rick's favorite things, second cities. And you may ask, what is a second city? A simple definition is that often a second city is the second largest city. So there are the blockbuster cities like London and Paris and Rome that a lot of people will just hop between when they're traveling and sometimes just go to one city in a country. We really advocate for going to some still large but not first cities. So oftentimes second cities are the second most populous, but not necessarily. Sometimes they're third or fourth. When we talk about second cities, we're more getting to the character of the city. Oftentimes, second cities are formerly industrial cities that were kind of the economic engine of their countries. They were the grittier counterpart to the more glamorous first cities. But a lot of these cities in Europe, now that Europe is a little less industrial than it used to be, many are being revitalized and glamorized. And so one common thread that we're going to see is that these are still large cities, but they're not the first city, and most of them were formerly industrial and now have a lot of culture to offer with far fewer crowds.
Very nicely put, Gabe. So tonight on our tour of Europe's top 10 second cities, we are going to travel from west to east, beginning in Porto, traveling north to Belfast and Glasgow, over to Antwerp and Hamburg, down to Lyon, Naples, and Split, before moving back up to the Baltic with Gdańsk, and finally finish in Plovdiv. And I will expand on Gabe's point regarding these second cities having a perhaps industrial past. You may notice that 8 out of the 10 are major European ports. So that's another theme you'll see throughout, at least at times, of tonight's presentation as well. And as we are covering 10 cities, we will only discuss each of them for around 5 minutes. That's the goal, at least. And so that will whet your appetite. If you'd like to learn more, many of these great destinations, however, are in our well-researched guidebooks that are full of travel tips. So consider learning more here as well.
In fact, 10 out of 10 are in our guidebooks, and 9 out of 10 appear on a Rick Steves Europe tour.
Very good.
Including our first destination, which is going to be Porto. In many ways, Porto, the second city of Portugal, is the textbook definition of a second city. It's properly the second most populous city in Portugal, but it has that gritty, formerly industrial character, but is also being revitalized. So it is a little lighter on sites than Lisbon, but it packs a really great cultural punch with fewer crowds, though Portugal is a top destination these days, so you'll certainly see more crowds than you used to. Porto's position as the economic engine of the country is illustrated by a common Portuguese saying, which is that Coimbra studies, that's where the major university is, Braga prays, Lisbon parties, and Porto works. So this is a tough city. It's a city built of granite, and they joke that the people are built of granite too. The people are also known as the tripe eaters for the most common dish that they have historically, which was tripe. And it's also called the unvanquished city because it has stood up to many invasions in the past without falling. For sightseeing purposes, Rick recommends one busy day of sightseeing, or even better would be 2 relaxed days. You can see on our our Heart of Portugal tour, we spend 2 nights in Porto. So one really busy sightseeing day with a couple half days. And travelers can think of the city in 3 parts. There is the modern city where the locals work and play. There is the postcard perfect Ribeira Riverside district where the tourists parade. And then on the other side of the river, there is the Vila Nova de Gaia, which is where the port wine flows. I had the privilege of traveling to Porto a few years ago when I was a teacher. I traveled in the summer between years of teaching, and I'm going to share some of my favorite moments from my time in Porto. Many people, the first thing that they notice about Porto is their beautiful blue tiles, or azulejos. For most people, it's the first thing that they notice because they are all across the interior of the São Bentos train station. So many people arrive here and are immediately greeted by scenes from Portuguese history or folk stories of the Douro Valley region. And you can see these throughout all of the city of Porto. Then if you go a little bit north, you're in that modern hub of the city where most of the people will go to work. You're going to see more locals here. It's capped at the top by the city hall. This is a monument to secular Portugal. They intentionally put the city hall and not a church on this main square of kind of the newer side of town. And then from there, you can just gradually make your way down to the Ribeira district, which is really where you're going to want to be as a tourist. It's where the rustic magic of Porto really comes to life. You'll notice, though, Porto is very walkable, but there are really no flat surfaces in the city, as you can see from this image. So I recommend walking if you can, but there are also buses, a metro, you can take an Uber, and there's 3 vintage trolleys that you can take. I enjoy walking. Portugal's famous for its mosaic sidewalks, and you can see some rustic ones and some more polished ones. You can see some very unique and angular buildings. The one on the left is telling you that you can dress well and cheaply there. And I even saw Luigi. He must have been on vacation from Italy. So you might run into a Mario Bros character there. If you love meandering through little niggling alleys like I do, Porto is a paradise. When I saw yellow arrows, I followed them. When the roads funneled me through a tunnel, I didn't ask questions, and I was rewarded with beautiful views of the iconic red rooftops, gray granite, and the blue tiles that you can see on the right there. Porto was spared from the 1755 earthquake that felled Lisbon, and so it is remarkably well preserved. One common site of the Ribeira district is the Stock Exchange Palace, which is not a stock exchange or a palace. Instead, it is actually the headquarters of the Commercial Association of Porto, and it celebrates the civic and commercial pride of the city with grand staircases, exquisite courtyards, and beautiful ballrooms. I also recommend there's a lot of beautiful green spaces. I walked along the river to the gardens of the Crystal Palace, where they have peacocks and a new sports stadium and beautiful flowers. I perched on a bench and ate my pastries while I had this beautiful view over the river. And speaking of the river, no trip to Porto is complete without crossing the river on the Luís I bridge. And that takes you over to the Vila Nova de Gaia neighborhood, where you have all of the various lodges for port. Port wine is named for the city of Porto, and there are many lodges that will vie for you, for your attention and for your business, and they will offer you tours of their cellars. We can see some bottles of port there dating back over 100 years, and you can also do a tasting of the ruby and tawny varieties. Personally, I don't claim to have a very refined palate, but it was the first time that they would actually give me tasting notes of like, you should taste cherries or chocolate. And I was like, I really taste it. So it's a beautiful city. I caught a view of some locals on the way back over the bridge, cracking into a beer, looking over the city at sunset. And if I were there, I'd be doing the same thing. So that is our taste of Porto. And now, so Ben and Emily and I are going to be covering 6 out of the 10, but we've also asked some of our friends and tour guide friends to cover 4 of the others. So now we are going to go to the second city of Ireland, the island of Ireland, with our very own Cameron Hewitt.
Hi, everybody. This is Cameron Hewitt. I'm the content director at Rick Steves Europe, and I do a lot of work on our guidebooks, including our Ireland guidebook. And I'm here to tell you about one of my favorite second cities in Europe, and that is Belfast, the capital of Northern Ireland, the second city of Ireland. So let me tell you a little bit about why I find this city interesting. Obviously, for a lot of folks who go to Ireland, they're really focused on the Republic of Ireland and the first city, which is Dublin. But I think it's worth considering going to the second city of Ireland, which is Belfast. Now, this is a little complicated because, of course, they're in different countries. So you could say Belfast is the second city of the island of Ireland. But of course, it's the capital and the first city of its own country, Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK. Very complicated politics in Ireland, of course, but just keep that in mind. This is the second city of the island of Ireland. And fortunately, it's a small island. So you're really only 2 hours by car, by train, or by bus between Dublin and Belfast. I think it's a worthwhile thing to round out your look at Ireland, to go to Belfast. It's a big, modern, urban city, a little bit of an urban jungle in parts. But of course, it still has lots of fascinating little details and walkable neighborhoods and fun little flourishes. For example, this is the monument in the middle of the city center walking street that's called the Spirit of Belfast. But of course, this is Ireland, so everyone gives it a funny nickname. They call this the Onion Rings. Lots of classic historical heritage buildings. If you want that kind of old British Isles sort of architecture, you can find it here with these old saloons and beautiful old hotels, but also lots of modern architecture. Much like a lot of second cities, Belfast is a place that had a lot of hard times, and more recently, it's been rejuvenated. There's lots of investment, lots of new construction. For example, right in the city center, there's a huge shopping mall and a free elevator that takes you up to a rooftop deck for a great view over the city. Another thing that's very typical of second cities is it's got kind of a funky creativity. This is a great sort of hipster city. Lots of great restaurants, lots of great nightlife. It's a fun place to go out for the evening and maybe do some pub hopping. And I've also had some really high quality food here as well. It's kind of a great foodie city. Of course, you can get the Guinness if you want. All of the pubs here are going to serve the same Guinness you'll get down south in the Republic of Ireland. But one thing I like about the Northern Ireland and Belfast is you don't get all of the kind of kitsy shamrock tourism, right? It's not aimed at tourists. This is for local people who enjoy their Guinness. Another neighborhood worth considering is across the river from the city center. It's called the Titanic Quarter, so named because, of course, this is where the Titanic was first built. Like a lot of second cities, Belfast is really an industrial city. Originally, the big industries were linen and then shipbuilding. And this district is all about the shipbuilding. They've rejuvenated it. They've added all of these modern buildings. They're kind of trying to redevelop it into a new people zone. And the cornerstone of the Titanic Quarter is a fascinating museum about the Titanic itself. So if you're interested in history's most famous boat and the most famous boat that was built in Belfast, be sure to make a visit to the Titanic Museum. It's got lots of high-tech, state-of-the-art exhibits and actual artifacts. You don't see a lot of items that were actually on the Titanic, but they have, for example, the display of one of the deck chairs from the Titanic. You can see here at the museum in the place where it was first designed and built. In fact, across the street from the Titanic Museum, you can visit the offices where they drafted the plans for the Titanic. It's now a hotel, and you can go into these halls with these big windows and imagine a bunch of designers huddled over tables under these big skylights drawing out the plans for the Titanic. This industrial heritage is so important to the people of Belfast, in fact, that the city symbol is not a cathedral or a city hall or a space needle. It's a couple of cranes. These are the cranes nicknamed Samson and Goliath that were used to build ships for many years, for many decades. And to this day, these remain sort of the symbol of Belfast. That's a good reminder that Belfast is really a working class city. And another aspect of that that's, I think, a very important facet of visiting Belfast is this gives you the opportunity to better understand the Troubles. If you're interested in Irish history, of course, the Troubles was this period from about the 1960s to the 1990s, where you saw a lot of clashes between the two main groups of the island of Ireland, the Protestants who were more faithful to the UK and to England, and then the Catholics in the Republic of Ireland, which often came to blows through this series of events called the Troubles. And the neighborhoods of West Belfast, the working class neighborhoods of West Belfast, was a place where a lot of that really occurred. And so a thoughtful traveler can go here, learn about the history, and learn about how, in a lot of ways, this is still a divided community. In fact, the peace wall that was built back then to separate the two communities, it still stands. You can walk along a wall that's intended to keep the Catholics and the Protestants away from each other. And then, of course, you can also go to the gates in the wall and learn about how these gates are open more and more and the communities are mixing more and more. The really interesting thing about, if you want to learn about the Troubles, it's lots of symbolism, lots of figures you really have to know kind of what the different things you're going to see on each side of the wall are. In our Rick Steves Ireland guidebook, we've got kind of a description of the different icons that you're going to find for each place and the different local heroes. For example, on the Republican side of the wall, on the Catholic side of the wall, you're going to see a lot of depictions of Bobby Sands, who was a very important leader of that community. And then if you go across to the Protestant side of the wall, you might find, for example, a mural of King Charles III, because over on that side, they still feel very proudly that they want to be a part of the United Kingdom. So that adds a really interesting facet to your visit to Belfast and really rounds out, I think, your understanding of Ireland as a whole. One nice thing I think is also kind of uplifting about visiting this area is you can see how things are changing. Some of the more hateful murals are being replaced with more optimistic ones, but it still remains a great place to learn about this important part of Irish history. So, hey, on your next trip to Ireland, consider getting away from some of the shamrocks and the Dublin and the famous sites of the Republic and heading up to this wonderful second city of Belfast and getting to know a different part of the Emerald Isle. Thank you very much and enjoy your trip to your favorite second city.
Oh, I'd love reports from Cameron like that.
I know, he doesn't get a night off.
We keep him busy.
Joining us last night. He's going to be doing the show on Monday.
We have him for his Balkan trip next month as well. He's already working on that, probably.
Yeah.
We're
very fortunate to have him.
indeed. And up next,
Yeah, I think we're gonna stay in the British Isles and
That's
make our way
right.
over to Glasgow.
That's right. Well, I got to go to Scotland for the first time last summer. I went on our Best of Scotland tour. And before I traveled there, I didn't know a lot about Glasgow other than that it had kind of a gritty reputation. But I would say I was very pleasantly surprised. It's a very artistic city. It has a lot of good restaurants and some exciting museums. But more than anything, I would say provides a really interesting contrast to Edinburgh. Glasgow, unlike Edinburgh, has no upper crust history. It's a thoroughly working class city. It also happens to be Scotland's largest city in Scotland's case. So I think that it really provided a well-rounded view for me of urban Scotland, and it is only an hour by train from Edinburgh, so it's very easy to add onto your Scotland itinerary. And if we were to take the train from Edinburgh into Glasgow, we would find ourselves in the middle of downtown, surrounded by beautiful Victorian architecture. And Glasgow actually has been called one of the world's best examples of a Victorian city, so much so that quite a few movies that are set in New York are actually filmed in Glasgow. Just a short walk from the central station, we would find ourselves in George Square in front of this beautiful city hall. And like a lot of our second cities, Glasgow had a heyday in the 19th century. It was at the forefront of the Industrial Revolution, and it was a shipbuilding powerhouse. It's estimated that about a quarter of the ocean-going ships at that time were built in Glasgow. Unfortunately, after World War II, Glasgow fell on some hard times, and that's kind of when it took on the gritty reputation that it still has today. But luckily, since then, the city has really revitalized. It's home to, as I said, a thriving arts and music scene, which in proper Glasgow fashion has a bit of an anti-establishment bend to it. Art shows and concerts are known to pop up in flats and sometimes abandoned buildings around the city. But really at the heart of that is the Glaswegians. They are a very friendly people. They're super passionate about their city. And I think that this image, this is also in George Square, I turned 90 degrees to the left. And I saw this building that says, "People make Glasgow." Glaswegians are also very famous for their sense of humor. Here we see the Duke of Wellington, and since the 80s, this cone has more or less been a permanent fixture on his head. The city at one point actually debated making the statue hard to climb on to prevent people from putting the cone back on his head, but a petition went around and it actually garnered 10,000 signatures arguing for the fact that the cone meant more to the people of Glasgow than the Duke of Wellington ever had. And so that plan was scrapped and he still wears the cone today. Another feature of downtown are all these beautiful, colorful murals. I think there is 30 of them, about 30 in total. And these were actually commissioned by the city. And so you can see the city does embrace this counterculture energy Glasgow has to it. This was one of my favorite murals. It is of the city's patron saint, Saint Mungo, just in modern day clothes. And here we have another very famous mural. We can see the woman is holding a magnifying glass, and it appears she's picking up something small. And this mural happens to be outside a strip club. So make of that what you will. Glasgow does have its fair share of top-notch museums, and many of them are free, like the Kelvin Grove here. The Kelvin Grove is sometimes called the Scottish Smithsonian, and it has quite a few exhibits, but one of my favorites was definitely on Scottish Romanticism. So there's a handful of rooms that are devoted to Scottish identity in art. And there's a lot of paintings depicting just the natural beauty of the Highlands, Highland clans, and even some historical events. And I found it really interesting to see these portrayals before I actually traveled into the Highlands later on my tour. The Kelvin Grove does have a excellent collection on the architect Charles Rennie Mackintosh. He is sort of Glasgow's hometown golden boy. He was working in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, and he developed his own unique flavor of Art Nouveau. And while you can see some of his pieces on display in the Kelvin Grove for free, this house, which costs about £10 to get into, was my favorite Mackintosh site. This is actually the reassembled home of Mackintosh and his wife with the original furnishings. And so it's a really, I think, unique opportunity to kind of step inside an artist's world. It was very immersive. And I found that when I became a little more familiar with his style, I kept seeing little details that were definitely Mackintosh inspired all over the city. So just kind of a fun thing. And Glasgow also famously has an excellent nightlife scene. It's a very youthful city. The University of Glasgow is kind of smack dab in the middle of it. And so, you know, there's a lot of students around. And this was a just a little lane in the West End that I went to. And just for reference, the only neighborhoods that we cover in the Scotland Guidebook in Glasgow are downtown and the West End. All the sites that I'm talking about today are in both of those neighborhoods. But they have an excellent nightlife scene, and I really enjoyed this summer sitting out on a nice evening, watching the people go by here. And there's a lot of live music, so it just kind of spills out onto the streets. But just a couple blocks away is what I think a very special music venue in Glasgow. This is a cathedral dating back to 1862. And obviously it has been renovated into a music venue. And they have a really interesting program there called A Play, a Pie, and a Pint. And it's devoted to producing just new plays, new performances, and quite a few of them have actually gone on to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So there's a lot of interesting performers working in Glasgow that you can enjoy. And overall, I just hope that you add Glasgow to your Scotland itinerary. It definitely shows a different side compared to Edinburgh. And I think visiting both honestly just makes both of them more interesting to you, so you can compare. And now we will hear from Rick Steves' guide, Nico Favareel, on Belgium's Antwerp.
Thank you very much, Emily. Off to Nico.
Well, hello, everybody. Hi, I'm Nico. I'm doing the Belgium and Holland tour for Rick Steves, also the Best of Switzerland. And I'd like to talk a little bit and walk you through a visit of Antwerp. Antwerp, the largest municipality of Belgium, but maybe lesser known than cities like Brussels or Bruges. Antwerp is very easy to get to. If you take the public transportation by train, you arrive in one of the most beautiful train stations in the world, and that's the central station of Antwerp. You'll have your first wow moment when you get off the train and you come into this bombastic but fascinating entrance hall. The city is easily connected and easy walkable. You can walk from the central station over a beautiful shopping street to the historic heart of the city. And you end up at the main square with its guild houses and its city hall. The guild houses represent several guilds that were already important during the Middle Ages. And you see a statue here on the square with a guy throwing a hand away in the air. You have to go to Antwerp to learn about that statue. Now, the hand is a symbol of Antwerp, and you'll find it everywhere, in every single shop, especially as a food candy. You have it in the shape of cookies or in the shape of chocolates. And as we're in Belgium, you do want to explore the cultural and the food culture that we have. So you see the chocolate hands on this picture, but quite a lot of bars. I believe Antwerp has the most bars per inhabitant of anywhere in Europe. And on the right-hand side, you see the most famous artist from Antwerp, Peter Paul Rubens. And in the back, you see the Church of Our Lady, where you can marvel at some of his paintings. Peter Paul Rubens is, of course, an inspiring figure. And this is a statue just in front of the Church of Our Lady of a little boy. Nello and Patrash is the dog. And they basically, it's a story in English. In American, it's called A Dog of Flanders. If you want to read it before you get to Antwerp, you can. It's a sad story about a little boy who wants to become an artist, but is not allowed to go see the paintings of Rubens inside of the church. And then a little bit further away, you're at the river. Antwerp is at the river Scheldt. This is the entrance gate to what is left of a big fortress that was already in the 13th century in Antwerp. It now houses the tourist information center of the city, and it's great to just stroll along the Scheldt River. Unique in Antwerp is also that there's no bridges crossing the river. As mentioned before, it's a cultural city, and the recently renovated or reopened Museum of Fine Arts is definitely worth a stop. It combines the Flemish masters, but also the paintings of Rubens, and also modern artists or more modern artists like James Ensor, and contemporary artists as well. It's a very good combination of different kinds of art, and definitely worth a visit. Antwerp has so many museums. You can easily spend 3 days just going from one museum to the other. This building has 5 floors with permanent and temporary exhibits. It's a great museum. You learn about the city of Antwerp, but also about maritime life. Most people actually go to the top floor for the viewing platform, and then you can have a look at how large the city is and how big and important the harbor of the city is. For Americans and Canadians, this is quite an important museum as well. It's the museum and the research center for the Red Star Line. A lot of immigrants left Europe via the Red Star Line from Antwerp to places like Philadelphia or New York or Montreal. And it's just fascinating to learn about this big voyage. So if you have ancestors that you know came with the Red Star Line, then you may want to visit this museum as well. So Antwerp is a big harbor city. It's the second largest harbor in Europe after Rotterdam. And this is the Harbor House. And it kind of shows you how Antwerp needs to deal with buildings from the past, but also adds a lot of modern elements to it. It's a great new architectural gem. It also represents a little bit the diamonds that Antwerp is known for. So if you're interested and you want to see something else than Amsterdam or Brussels, just stop for 2 or 3 nights in Antwerp and you won't regret it.
Well, that was great to hear from Nico. And actually, I knew nothing about Antwerp when I uh, discussed the city with him, and I was really surprised. It seems absolutely stunning.
And I think both Antwerp and Glasgow are good points that they're actually both the largest by population, but they still have the spirit of the second city because,
Yes.
you know, Brussels and Edinburgh, even if they're a little smaller, they are the city that are the capital or get the attention.
The
So
rebellious younger sister
yes,
city.
exactly.
And it's the only city I think we're discussing tonight that's not on one of our tours. Isn't that right?
Yes, Antwerp is the only one that's not on a tour, but we do cover it in our guidebook. But yeah, all the rest of them are on our tour itineraries. And next up, Ben, I think that you're going to take us to another great port city that probably rounds out the top 3 ports with Rotterdam and Antwerp, I would imagine.
I think you're probably right. I think Hamburg is the second most significant traffic port in Europe. So yes, moving a little further east to what I believe is our largest second city, Hamburg, with a population of about 2 million people. Easy to reach from Berlin via Germany's excellent intercity express train. Here we see a striking symbol of the city, the Elbe Philharmonic building. It is meant to resemble a steamship coming into port, riding the waves, and you'll hear a bit more about it later. It's a gorgeous building. So, Hamburg. This is principally a waterside city, a very green city, and its roots in that, of course, are historic, but public access to these places is fantastic because there was a 1950s law guaranteeing that the public could reach large portions of the waterside area in Hamburg. So that's something that makes it very special. Its Speicherstadt neighborhood, filled with water to sky brick buildings, once housed cotton and tobacco, but today they house offices, museums, and restaurants. And my favorite time to be in this neighborhood is at night. And Gabe, when you went to Hamburg, were you here at?
I was in that neighborhood, but I never went at night, so I
It's-
guess I'll have to go back.
It's delightful, a photographer's dream, but even if you're not a photographer, it's a great place to be in the evening. In summer, the waterfront is bustling with activity. There are buskers and vendors. It's a wonderful place to be. The Hafen city, which is close by to the Speicherstadt neighborhood I just mentioned, is really a second city example of Hamburg's revitalization. This area has changed dramatically in recent decades, and now it has a mix of the modern and maritime architecture that Hamburg is famous for. And you can see the Elbe Philharmonic sneaking through. And city planners love Hamburg for its architecture. This is the interior of the Elbe Philharmonic. It is a hotel, a concert hall, an apartment complex, and a public plaza all in one. Rick likes to say that Hamburg has the best harbor tour in all of Europe. It's about 1 hour long, and you can hear from locals like this gentleman about how massive the shipping industry is, with about 12,000 vessels a year going through the port, and it is, I believe, the second busiest port in Europe. Unique museums also dot Hamburg's center. This is perhaps the most popular, the miniature wonderland. It has a model airport complete with planes landing and taking off every 15 minutes, models of the US and Europe, including a model of Hamburg Harbor. So definitely worth visiting. I will say it is very popular. I would say it's perhaps the only site in Hamburg where you should consider getting advanced reservations online. More museums to consider. The Hamburg History Museum is as large and complex as the city it covers, I would say. It tells many stories in Hamburg's past, including its devastating 1842 fire, the history of the Elbe River, and much more, including exhibits on the city's Jewish heritage. Speaking more on Hamburg's history, I feel I must mention a horrific moment in the city's past in July 1943, when the city was targeted by 700 bombers, creating a major firestorm. It took many years to rebuild from this. In a matter of 3 hours or so, 35,000 people lost their lives. The St. Nikolai Memorial on the spot of a former church of the same name commemorates this horrific event. and remembers and commemorates those who were lost. Today, fortunately, Hamburg is better than ever, and it has included its World War II era architecture into the contemporary scene. This is a World War II bunker that's now a graffiti wall and a climbing wall. I think that's pretty cool.
Do you do the graffiti while you climb? That seems interesting.
Some people do. I'm not sure that I would go for that, but maybe next time, Gabe, we'll go and do it together. Rick also loves Hamburg for its bike system. It is extremely accessible and easy to use, and Hamburg is quite flat. So when you're here, join the locals, get two wheels, and cruise around. If you're in Hamburg on a Sunday, I highly recommend you get up early, if you can at least, and go to the venerable morning fish market. You can see locals here grabbing a beer already. You know, it's never too early for a beer in Germany, I think. You can see the local catch, and you can see all the local produce as well. And I must mention one of Hamburg's most energetic neighborhoods, the Reeperbahn, named after the rope makers who once worked and lived here and supplied Hamburg's shipping industry. Today, it's the Broadway of Germany, a famous entertainment zone with theater and live music. And I believe the Beatles actually launched themselves here in the 1960s as well. I just love all the lights and the activity of this area. So this forward-thinking, maritime, almost Nordic-feeling second city is not on the top of most North Americans' travel list. But I hope you've learned a bit about it today and will consider adding it to your next European itinerary. All right, up next, we go to France, to Lyon, and our wonderful guide, Virginie Moore, will tell us more. Excuse me, Virginie Moret. Moret.
Bonjour, Rick Steve travelers. My name is Virginie Moret. I work as a guide for Rick. I'm also a book researcher, and I would love to introduce you to the city of Lyon today. When I moved back from the United States, I decided to settle in Lyon and live there for 4 years. I'm not a city person. I love working in Paris, but I would not live in Paris. And I found Lyon to be the perfect town for me. It has 2 hills and 2 rivers, so maybe because of that small size and the nature, that's why I love to call it home. So let me first take you to the Théâtre Gallo-Romain, the old Gallo-Roman theater, which is on top of the Fourvière Hill. And so you can see the remnants from where the city started 2,000 years ago. Today it's still used. Every summer for a month, we have beautiful concerts with international known singers, and it brings back life to the rooms. On top of the same hill, we have the Basilica of Fourvière that dates from the late 19th century. And where you see the Archangel Michael is where what I call my favorite viewpoint of all of Lyon. So let me take you to the top. And this is the beautiful city of Lyon, about 500,000 people sprawling in front of you. You're at the highest point you can go to the city. You have to pay to go to the rooftop, but it's an easy tour to do. And at the bottom, you have what we call the Vieux Lyon, the old Lyon, with the cathedral. Then you have a river. And then another river that you may see in the background. And between those 2 rivers is what we call the presqu'île. Presqu'île in French means almost an island. And this is the 19th century part of the city. So it was revamped at the same time as Paris was being revamped. So what I love about Lyon is that it's very walkable. You can be at the top of the hill in the Roman rooms, walk down to the Middle Ages Renaissance neighborhood, cross the river, and be in the 19th century in Lyon. It's a walkable city. However, we have great public transportation, and there are a couple of funicular taking you up and down the hill. And now I would like you to explore the Vieux Lyon, Old Lyon. If you were put on a plane, blindfolded, and dropped in the middle of the Vieux Lyon, you'd have no idea you're in France. It looks more Italian than French. And that's what I think I like about Lyon, which is, for the French, the beginning of going southern France. In the Vieux Lyon, you have the cathedral. Gothic cathedral that gives you a good perspective on, good idea on how to explore the Gothic world and learning more about that architectural style. And we also have one of the specificity of Lyon. I think that's the only city in France that has what we call traboules. Traboules are passageways leading from one street to another, or sometimes just leading to a courtyard, such as the beautiful pink tower courtyard that you see here. It's only a staircase. So if you think about it, in the 16th century, Lyon was so prosperous that the people who lived here could just build a staircase that beautiful just in their building. A quarter of the economy in the Renaissance time was based on silk. And I was fortunate enough a few years ago to have Rick coming to film in Lyon. And here he was learning about how to tie a silk scarf. Lyon is also famous for its food. A restaurant in Lyon is called the Bouchon, traditional meat, very hearty with lots of sauce. And bouchon also means cork in French. We have that perfect weather that makes you able to eat outside almost all year long. I would say we're not that far south, but still almost all year long. But if you're worried about eating too much meat, what we have is also the title of the capital of gastronomy. On that painted wall here, you see the chef in the middle is Paul Bocuse, who made French food famous all over the world. And so we have fine restaurants and simple restaurants like the Bouchon. Now, Lyon is also famous as the capital, the city of light. And being such a small town, very walkable and quite safe at night, it's easy for you to enjoy how they've brought beautiful light on the buildings. So that was my view on the city of Lyon. It was, in the last 10 years, it was voted twice as the best escape of Europe. So I think you could spend 2 to 3 days in Lyon and you'd be quite happy. It's only 2 hours by train from Paris. It's on the way to Provence. And I hope you come to visit one day. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
Merci, Virginie.
I was surprised when I was looking into it that, and I get them mixed up. It's between Paris and Lyon. One is the city of light and one is the city of lights, plural. I think
Really?
Paris is the city of lights and Lyon is the city of light. So.
I remember taking a course on the history of France since 1880, and I remember the professor saying, Paris is principal in all ways except for gastronomy, and that's Lyon. Yeah.
Well, if you have to be good at one thing, I think they picked the right category.
I agree.
All right. Well, speaking of good food, Emily, I think you're taking us to another hub of great gastronomy.
That's right. We are going to keep moving south. And as I'm sure both of you have heard Rick say, if you like Italy as far south as Rome, go even farther south. It just gets better. Italy is a country that intensifies as you go deeper, and Naples is certainly no exception. Naples got its start in 500 BC as the Greek colony of Neapolis, meaning new city, and it has been continuously inhabited ever since. The Bay of Naples, where the city sits on the Bay of Naples in the shadow of the infamous Mount Vesuvius, and this position proved to be quite lucrative for Naples as sea trade became more important to the European economy. Naples found itself smack dab in the middle of Mediterranean commerce, and all of this wealth and status ended up producing a golden age for Naples from about 1500 to 1800. And the city attracted a lot of great thinkers and artists like Bernini and Caravaggio. And it was at this time that a lot of neoclassical palaces and Baroque art and architecture started popping up all over the city. And it's this time period that gave Naples the look that it still has today. And I think it provides a very elegant, glamorous, old world and sometimes decaying backdrop to the famous street life of Naples. There's a lot of great street life around, or excuse me, museums and artwork around Naples, but really what makes it so distinct, one of the qualities is its vibrant street life. Naples is the most densely populated city in Europe, and as a result, it just kind of oozes with life. There's people everywhere, and that's why the streets are so vibrant and chaotic and, you know, sometimes congested. And I think if you'd like to get a look at that, you know, romantic idea of Naples living life in the streets, you want to go to the Spanish Quarter. This is a working class neighborhood, and it's a great example of basso living, which means low living. And this is characterized by apartment buildings with 2 or 3 bedrooms being shared by 5, 6, 7, sometimes 8 family members. And so when everyone's crammed in those close quarters, they kind of, you know, just spill out onto the streets. So you might see kids playing soccer in the streets, friends gathering, you might even see some family members arguing. But another thing you got to remember is to look up while you're exploring these neighborhoods. You're probably going to see people doing their laundries and taking full advantage of their balconies. And you might even see somebody using a bucket to lower something to street level, or maybe pass, you know, a cooking utensil to another neighbor. So always remember to look up. These are kind of urban canyons, since the streets are so narrow and the buildings are so tall. And from the Spanish Quarter, we can start a really excellent walking tour of the city down the Spaccanapoli. This is a narrow street that dates back to ancient Greek times, and it splits the city in half. The name actually translates to split Naples. And so today it just runs through the city's core, and it makes a really easy way to link some impressive sites, some interesting churches, some of which have some really amazing artwork. And just overall get an essence for this, or an idea of the city's essence. Just down the Spaccanapoli, we may run into the Church of Gesù Nuovo. And obviously it has a brilliant Baroque interior, but this church is particularly notable for its statue of Saint Giuseppe Moscati. He was the first modern doctor to be canonized, and he was very famous for helping the poor. And so if you visit this church, you may see a steady stream of Neapolitans taking turns to hold the statue's hand, and some of them even like to kiss the statue. And then to the right here, we see the Sale Moscati, and these are little plaques that actually give thanks to their prayers that have been answered by Moscati. So each one of them has a little representation of the ailment that was cured. These plaques are called ex votos, and they actually date back to, they trace back to the city's ancient pagan Greek roots. And just a couple of paces away, we'll also encounter what Rick might call some offbeat delights. This is a little alley that just shoots right off the Spaccanapoli, and it sells nativity scenes all year round. So just like Americans like to collect Christmas ornaments year round, Italians add nativity scenes or pieces to their nativity scenes. So this is kind of a distinctive local craft for Naples, and you might even see, if you go shopping, some Neapolitan characters popping up in there, maybe some fishermen. And here, again, on the Spaccanapoli, we have the Chapel of Maradona. And so this is devoted to the famous 1980s soccer player, Diego Maradona, who played for Naples in the 80s. And he, if you visit in person, you can't see maybe in this picture, but if you visit in person, you can make out a lock of his hair. Of course, one of the best sites in Naples is its archaeological museum. It's one of the world's best museums devoted to ancient art, and it boasts a lot of statues, decorations, and art that were recovered from Pompeii and Herculaneum after Mount Vesuvius erupted and covered them in lava and ashes. So this really is a very great, interesting complement to a visit to either of those sites, just because it makes the lives of those ancient people, I think, a lot more vivid. And here are just a couple of my favorite pieces in the museum. On the left, we see a statue of the spear carrier. And you can't tell here, but he's actually 7 feet tall. And he used to stand in a Pompeii gym where he inspired athletes by showing them the correct proportions of Greek beauty. And then on the right, we have a mosaic that was recovered from one of Pompeii's ritziest villas, the House of Fawn. And this depicts the Battle of Alexander. Of course, no visit to Naples is complete without having, I would say, 4, 5, 6 pizzas. So, yes, a day. So, Naples is famously the birthplace of pizza. And if you wanted, you could really make a pilgrimage out of just eating your pizza. You could visit the supposed birthplace of pizza at the Antica Pizzeria de Michele. And you're probably going to wait in a line for a place like that, but luckily there are little joints all over the city cranking out pizzas with their wood-fired ovens. And so I would recommend just asking your hotel staff where you should get a pizza. And Naples is a very colorful city, a very beautiful city, and it is the grand finale on our South Italy tour for a reason. And so if you're going to the Amalfi Coast this summer, or you're even just day tripping from Rome to Pompeii, I would recommend you extend your stop and stay a couple days in Naples.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Emily.
Looks like it's the very definition of beautiful chaos.
Yes,
Bella
that's right.
chaotica.
And up next, we go to Split. Is that right? With Sasha Golub.
All right. Just to hop across the Adriatic.
Dobar dan, everybody. My name is Sasha. I've been a long-time tour guide with Rick Steves Europe. One of the tours I do is called The Best of Adriatic. And one of the favorite locations we visit on this tour is the city of Split. Here we go. This is a view of the city from afar. In the foreground is a pier called Mateuszka. In the evenings, it's not uncommon to see locals just hanging around, singing, having a guitar, just having a good time. And then in the backdrop, you will see a line of palm trees that go along the famous main waterfront promenade that's called the Riva. On my tours, I often invite my tour members to join the people of Split in their living room. And always get a lot of question marks, but this is their living room, the waterfront promenade. People live in relatively small apartments, so a lot of the life happens outdoors, and this would be one of the main locations. In the mornings, the locals will enjoy their coffee and newspapers. In the evening, they will parade up and down this waterfront promenade, gossip, and see who's around and who isn't. This is one of my favorite locations and one of my favorite images of Split. The reason for it is very simple. You have all of the 1700 years of history here in one image. Way down in the bottom, the bedrock where the city grew up on. Then the central part of the image is taken by what is called the substructures of Diocletian's palace. And then on the top, we have medieval homes with a magnificent cathedral bell tower. The most recent addition to this photo would be the windows on the right-hand side of it, and they are from about the mid-1960s. And this is where it all began. When Diocletian decided to build his retirement home here, the engineers stumbled upon a problem. It was to be built on a sloped terrain. To compensate for it all, they had to build a substructure. This is part of it. This would be part of the main corridor of Diocletian's palace. You can hug a Roman pillar downstairs in the substructures. Nobody will look odd at you, and you can just observe layers of history, both literally and figuratively. And we can do it outside as well. This is what is called the vestibule. This was part of the chambers system of Diocletian's palace. And then just peeking at the very top of the oculus is again the bell tower of the cathedral. Again, just layers of history presenting itself in Split. Split, if anything, is a mishmash of architectural styles. This should remind you very much of Venice. And indeed, it's intended to do so. This should be a small copy of Piazza San Marco. But then just yards away, we will move to Vienna. And we have these statues on the corner of a building, which is actually a sulfur spa. And this statue is holding its ears. Legend has it that, well, this building is right next door to the fish market. And of course, the fishmongers are a little bit loud, and people enjoying their spa treatment are covering their ears not to be disturbed by the noise that the fishmongers make. Our group. And Split, if anything, is, besides being an architectural mishmash, is all about details. If you look in the center of the image, just beyond the green window shutters, you will see a bit of an arch. This is part of the original Diocletian's structure. It was part of his spa, part of his therme. And more details. When the architects were building the palace, they had to also make it safe. And if you look at this detail of the L cut in the stone, this was to prevent horizontal shifting of the stone. So the palace was earthquake proof. Details, details, details. This is modern art. This happens to be found downstairs also in the substructures of Diocletian's palace. Nevertheless, you will find bits like this all over the city. And you can do a little bit of a treasure hunt and play around, and you will find all sorts of interesting modern art in the city as well. Why not treat yourself to a concert? The theater in Split is magnificent. This is obviously the indoors of it. And I happened to be in the city on tour while there was the visiting ensemble that the Grand Miller Orchestra was playing in the city. And I just bought myself a €9 ticket and enjoyed a beautiful evening of music that we are all familiar with. If you happen to be in Split and then the concert takes place, go join the locals. Why not? We like to say around here that half of what we do is what we put on the plate. This is my favorite restaurant in Split, and this is my favorite dish there. It's a simple octopus salad. The boys know me there, and they know that I like it fresh, and they will not serve it to me unless it is fresh. And trust me, they will not serve it to you either unless it's fresh. Another simple dish is this simple grilled tuna steak. You can see on the plate 3 ingredients: potatoes, tuna, and a little bit of salad that acts like decoration in there. Clean, fresh ingredients. This is what the food around here is all about. Now, this may look like a bunch of hooligans on the main piazza in the city, but it's not. It's the Croatian way to celebrate love. This is actually a wedding. And the torches were lit, and the people were dancing, and the music was playing, and the Croatian flag was waved. And it's just a beautiful celebration of a new chapter in the lives of the groom and the bride. And we were all just invited to join in. It was just beautiful fun. Walking tour. And this is exactly the same piazza, less than 12 hours later. One more detail that I'd like to point out here, and these are the columns that you see on both edges of the picture. Those are monolithic columns that Diocletian brought for himself from Luxor. A famous modern statue of a famous Croatian sculptor, Ivan Mištrović. Locals walk by it and they rub the toe of the statue and make a spiritual wish. Why don't you go to Split, rub that toe, and make a wish that you will come to Split one more time? That was a short introduction to Split. I hope to see you on one of our future adventures. Thank you. До свидания.
What character?
I know. We are fortunate to have so many amazing guides and guides that take their time to contribute to our presentations. And now I think if people are counting, that was 8 out of 10. So we have 2 final second cities to go.
Okay, I will dart us back further north to what I think is Europe's most underrated city, in perhaps Europe's most underrated country. We will go to Gdańsk, which, as you can see here, is where we start our 10-day Poland tour. And it is the first time where our tour members, I think, drop their mouths because they're so surprised at the beauty of Poland. And I hope you will see why shortly. So Gdańsk is about 2.5 hours from Warsaw on the train. It's very accessible. and it is also another port city. It is extremely charming. People think, oh, this is Poland. This architecture looks like it could be from the Netherlands or another Nordic country or Scandinavia. This is the Royal Way in Gdańsk, and at the end there you see the city hall. You can go up 293 concrete steps to a great view. One of the most impressive buildings here on this drag is the Artus Court, named after King Arthur. Merchants from all over Europe in the medieval age came to Gdańsk and they met here to discuss and trade. This is in fact the only original medieval merchant guild meeting house in all the Baltic region, so it's very special. Gdańsk was a proud Hanseatic city. The Hanseatic League was a medieval trading league led by Germans based in Lübeck near Hamburg, and actually Hamburg, which we discussed earlier, was also a Hanseatic city. This league expanded across dozens of cities in Northern Europe into an economic union that in many ways is a precursor for the current European Union. And this period was extremely important for Gdańsk. It brought a lot of wealth, and its architecture and its heritage is very much reflected in that period of history. Like Hamburg, Gdańsk is largely made of brick, and they still use brick today, even in more modern structures like the train station. But here you see this crane that is under construction. That is from the 15th century, used for commercialism. Stone was limited, so that's primarily why they went with red brick. But it's beautiful and a wonderful characteristic of the center of Gdańsk. I mentioned the Hanseatic period. I will mention two other important periods in Gdańsk history. The second being the Second World War, because near Gdańsk is where the Second World War in Europe began in 1939 when Hitler invaded. And in 2017, Poland unearthed this very impressive World War II museum. I believe it's the largest historic exhibit in the world, so definitely pace yourself. But it uses many artifacts and reels to tell the story of the Second World War, largely from the Polish perspective. So it's an extremely important place to visit in Gdańsk. The third period in Gdańsk history I must mention to you is a little bit more recent, from about 1980 or the 1980s. Here at what was then known as the Lenin shipyard, Lenin had a cult of memory in the Soviet Union, so there are many things named after him. Workers went on strike in 1980, and they created a trade union known as Solidarity. Lech Wałęsa, that's an important name, became Solidarity's spirited leader, and the next door Solidarity Center tells the story of this movement. 17,000 workers striked for 18 days inside the shipyard, refusing to leave, passing notes to their families through the wall. They were hungry, they were scared, but they were inspired to protest the communist regime. 16 months later, martial law was declared and riot police cracked down. Solidarity went underground, but it in fact only gained momentum. It would become a political party in 1989, and Lech Wałęsa was elected Poland's first post-communist president. The Solidarity movement created cracks in the communist regime across Central Eastern Europe and ultimately played a major role in its downfall throughout the region. So this is perhaps the largest brick church in the entire world, certainly the largest in Europe at least, and it is the principal historic place of worship in Gdańsk. Built before the Reformation, there are 500 stone gravestones of Gdańsk's leading merchants. No surprise, they were the wealthiest people, so they had the most important and valuable plot. There is also a stunning pipe organ and a great view of the city from the ceiling. And I must mention that Gdańsk has many excellent and affordable restaurants. Poland is a little bit less expensive than the Western European average, another reason why it's a great place to visit. I would suggest you do what these people are doing here, and that is a vodka tasting with appropriate accompaniments. There are a few things more Polish, I would argue. Well, maybe there's a few things more Polish. Here we have some pierogi, which are a Polish dumpling with various fillings. They can be sweet, they can be savory. These are likely savory with an onion accompaniment, but they're absolutely delicious and far better than any pierogi I've had around here at least. So that is my introduction to you of Gdańsk, and we'll go back to the main drag next to the symbol of the city. We've seen a few symbols of our second cities, like the crane in Belfast. The symbol of Gdańsk is Neptune, god of the sea, hence city's maritime heritage. But I hope you've seen that Gdańsk is ready to welcome you. It's ready to impress. It has so much charm and character and history. I hope you definitely visit it at some point in the future.
Well, it's appropriate that Neptune is the symbol because Gdańsk looks simply out of this world. We are going to finish our tour of our top 10 second cities in Europe with our easternmost second city, and that is Plovdiv in Bulgaria. In just a few moments, we're also going to have a brief Q&A session, so remember to get your questions in. But for now, I'm excited to chat about Plovdiv with you. I had the privilege of joining our 12-day Best of Bulgaria tour this past September, and I was extremely humbled by Bulgaria. Even having worked at a European travel company for years, it was incredible what a rich and diverse and deep history and culture this country has that I was entirely unaware of. And I think Plovdiv was probably the best example of that. Plovdiv has been continuously inhabited for over 7,000 years. That's longer than Rome and Athens. And it was first inhabited by the Thracians. But it did not evade Greek and Roman occupation. It became Philippopolis under the Greeks, and then Trimontium under the Romans. Tri for three and mont for mount, because it was perched on 3 hills, though one of the nicknames is City of 7 Hills. So I'm not sure where the other 4 came from. But it's about 2.5 hours from the first city and capital of Sofia. But Plovdiv is considered the cultural capital of Bulgaria. In fact, in 2019, every year Europe has a capital of culture. And in 2019, Plovdiv was that selection. So it is renowned for its depth and variety of culture. And I'd like to take a quick look at some of the best aspects of the culture now. So you may have noticed a trend amongst the cities that we've been discussing tonight that many of Europe's great cities are cleaved into 2 parts, the old town and the new town. And Plovdiv is no exception. We're going to start in the old town, which is perched up on a hill. There's kind of a little statue map of it on the left, and we'd see a nice mural of it on the right. But it is known for having a lot of homes in the Bulgarian National Revival style. One of the hallmarks of that is these buildings where each floor gets wider and wider. I think our guide Stefan may have said something about like the property being taxed based on the ground level, but I would have to fact check that. But you do have to watch your head. And of course, it's also a bit tricky to navigate with the large cobbled streets, but it's a joy to walk around. And fortunately, you can enter a lot of these historic homes. This one serves as the regional ethnographic museum. And another, the Hindlian House, is one that you can enter and go inside. You have to put these little plastic covers over your shoes, but you can waltz through the house and see there's paintings in it from scenes from all different parts of the world. They even have a small little Turkish bath, which was very fun for me because I had just come from Turkey. And one of my favorite details is they actually, on a lot of the homes above the door, they do a little painting of the house. This was actually on the door above kind of a little secondary building that was removed from the house. And in case the main building were to burn down, they have a little picture of what it looked like so that they could try to recreate it. My favorite museum, though, in the Old Town is a gallery for the local 20th century artist Zlatiu Boyadjiev. And he is a fascinating artist because he had 2 very distinct chapters to his career. The first chapter, he had these more not photorealistic, but more realistic, tidier depictions of life in the countryside and the local industry. And then when he was middle-aged, he actually suffered a stroke and lost the use of his dominant right hand. And so he had a second chapter of his career where he was using his left hand to make these much more impressionistic, colorful, extravagant, lively street scenes. And the museum it demonstrates work from both of his periods, gives details about his life, but it definitely has a lot of things that are unexpected and unique. So I greatly enjoyed walking around and taking in the various paintings. This one was my favorite. I just love the sense of movement. And again, you can see some of those houses up there that are larger on top than they are on the bottom. Going down from the old town, though, at the base of the hill and the kind of the gateway to the new town is the Kapana district. Also known as, Kapana means the mousetrap. It used to have a lot of jewelry shops and clothing shops, and the stereotype was that it ensnared the local women and they couldn't go through without buying something. As with many second cities, there's been a lot of revitalization. For a while, this was kind of a downtrodden area, but it's now been revitalized. Rick describes it as a hipster paradise, and it has a lot of trendy cafes and restaurants and galleries, and is a joy to walk through. You can see here really this charming restaurant on the left that's all painted like it's a tree house, and then we see some very graphic and kind of graffitied ads as well. And where else are you going to find what says hipster neighborhood like a bike covered in knitwear? Am I right? And then the Kapana district leads then to King Alexander I Street, which is the big pedestrian promenade on par with any great pedestrian street in Europe. It is so lively, and just, the passeggiata extends far beyond just Italy. My favorite part of the city, though, isn't the old town or the new town. It is the old town that you find when you go beneath the city. This was an old Roman forum that has been built into just a public walkway that we just casually strolled through on the way from our hotel into the city. You have an ancient Roman horse racing track that is below that. So this is underneath that pedestrian promenade. They've exposed a portion of the stands where people would spectate for these races. There is the Episcopal Basilica of Philippopolis. When I first walked past this, I thought maybe it was kind of a weird Scientology thing. It looks kind of futuristic. But it's this building that's been built around this restoration of a very early Christian church during the Roman occupation. And it had actually 2 layers of incredible mosaics that are still being actively restored in this venue. And so you kind of walk on the glass going above it. They have 2 stores to showcase the 2 different layers. I love this one. It's faded now, but that used to be rainbow. I think the one in the middle is kind of maybe the origin of that rainbow wheel that you get on a Mac when you're trying to download something. But the most striking is they have, and the reason that there's a peacock on the logo is that they're famous for their mosaics of birds. So vast stretches of the mosaics were just dozens of different types of birds. My favorite ancient site, though, is the ancient theater. As a literature nerd, I love the idea of the people during Greek and occupancy going and seeing performances here. And there are many modern acts that happen here today. You see they're setting up for a concert. I actually went back at the end of the day and I couldn't get a ticket, but there were people lined up at the fence around because the person performing was Lily Ivanova, who our guide Stefan described to us as the Tina Turner of Bulgaria. So she's 85 years old, she's still performing, and I'm gonna leave you with this little snippet of her concert as she performs with the city of Plovdiv as the backdrop. It's just so cool to have a Greek amphitheater in a modern city with this communist era pop star performing, and really showed me why Plovdiv is a capital of culture. So that is our roundup of our top 10 second cities. We covered a lot of ground. And now I believe we're going to bring back Lisa to find out who wins. I think that we should send the shirt off your back, Ben.
My shirt.
No, we'll send you a fresh shirt. So Lisa, can we hear who our big winner is for the night?
Yes, our winner this evening is David H. from Portland, Oregon.
All right, congratulations, David. Enjoy your new swag.
So he will be hearing from you, correct?
Yes, David, I will email you tomorrow.
Perfect. So we do have some questions, just a few this evening. Very active Q&A session, but a lot of people just talking about how great the show is and how much they've enjoyed their travels and their armchair travels. So, but the first question is, Francis, you mentioned, Francis, they mentioned second cities for Ireland and Scotland. Do you have any opinion what a good second city for England would be?
So England is, I don't think that there's one city that really comes out as the dominant second city, which is part of the reason that we chose to go with one for Ireland and Scotland. You have, I think personally, if I had to pick one, I really love Manchester. It really has that kind of rough and tumble, gritty attitude. But you know, it has a major airport. It's easy to get to. It's very lively. I love going out at night. It has canals that go through the city. So I think it has a lot of tourist merit. But you'll also hear Liverpool as an option. You know, I think population-wise, Birmingham might actually be second, though I'm not sure that has as much tourist draw, at least for me, as Liverpool and Manchester.
You know, Charlie Rawson, one of our Scotland guides, she actually was just on Rick's podcast, and she makes the case for Bristol as, I'm not sure population-wise how it would compare, but definitely has that sort of industrial, post-industrial feel that's been revitalized. So yeah, you could check that out in our podcast.
Wonderful.
Well,
Good plug for our radio show.
I am not perhaps as well traveled in all parts of England, but my initial answer would have certainly been Manchester. Although the case for Bristol is there, it sounds like as well.
Excellent, thank you. Denise writes, many of these cities tonight are port cities. I think, Ben, you mentioned already 9 out of 10. Are they cruise ship ports too? She is trying to avoid cruise crowds.
It depends. Split, for example, I would say is.
Naples definitely is as well.
But in Northern Europe, Gdańsk and Hamburg are to some extent, although I think the traffic is not as prolific as in the Mediterranean. The time of year you travel can help, certainly, because in Northern Europe, the season is much shorter. So that can be a factor you could consider as well.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't say that these cities, even the ones that do get cruise traffic, are kind of the poster children for being overrun by cruise groups, in part because they are second cities.
That's true.
Thank you. Lori wants to know, how is public transport in Belfast? If she's staying a week in the city center, how necessary is it for her to rent a car?
I think if my memory serves, in part we gave Cameron Belfast because I don't think we've been to Belfast. Lisa, have you been?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Well, Lisa's just more knowledgeable about us than Belfast.
I love Belfast, but the public transportation system is totally reliable. No issues there. The buses run very well. And taking cabs in Belfast can also be an interesting cultural experience, as some of the cabs actually even run tours into the sectarian neighborhood. So you can hire a cabbie and get a wealth of information with that. Absolutely no reason to rent a car staying in the city center of Belfast.
Cool. Well, thank you, Lisa. You were actually going to be our pinch hitter to record a video for Belfast if Cameron didn't have time. So,
well, thank you. Our last question this evening, and it's from Cynthia, and her question is really a survey. Assuming that none of you have been to all 10 of these towns, which one would you like to visit?
That is a great question. And actually, Lisa, it was funny because I wanted to finish with a question for our viewers. I would love to see people post in the Q&A which of the 10 most grabbed their interest and that they would most consider building into their next itinerary. But I know that we haven't been to all 10. So
No one's been to all 10. Yeah.
Let's see, top of.
So this is assuming we haven't been to any, right?
Well, this would be of the ones that we haven't been to.
Aha.
Yes, and you're each supposed to answer, so you don't have to come to a consensus.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go first because actually yesterday we had an all-staff meeting here at Rick Steves Europe, and we often will have one of our colleagues who went on a different tour of ours give a little trip report and teach the whole company about the itinerary. And my dear colleague Stephen reported on his travels in Poland. He did the Best of Poland tour, and which is one of our newest itineraries. And he also raved about Gdańsk. And I'm definitely guilty of having an image of Poland that isn't that cute and charming. So to see the maritime heritage and the pastel buildings, I immediately wanted to go.
Yeah. Gdańsk is great, Gabe. Yeah. I would have to say Plovdiv. Your presentation, Gabe, certainly inspired me to want to visit. And also, I love Central and Eastern Europe. That's my favorite region. And I have not been to Bulgaria, so I would really enjoy learning more about it. I think that would be for sure my top pick.
Yeah, I'd have to say, Gabe, you really hooked me with Plovdiv, especially when you showed that concert at the end. I really love going to concerts when I travel, and that amphitheater is just so like exciting. Just thinking about how people were performing there, centuries upon centuries ago, and you're seeing a concert there today. Just it gives me chills, and I've been eyeing our Best of Bulgaria tour myself, so I'm gonna have to say Plovdiv.
So there was also that ancient theater in Lyon. We could do a little ancient theater tour of Europe and just go see a bunch of performances in old Greek and Roman amphitheaters. So, and actually Lyon probably would have been one of my top picks as well.
Thank you, Lisa.
How about you, Lisa? Have you been to all of them?
I have not been to all of them. I have been to 8 of them. So I have not been to Plovdiv and I have not been to Gdańsk. And Gdańsk has been on my list for a really long time. I know Ben loves Poland, and we bonded over that when we first met. How much I liked Poland when I went there, and I'm longing to go back. So Gdańsk.
Excellent choice.
Okay,
we
guys.
look forward to seeing what all of you said in the Q&A. We always download our Q&A report at the end of each evening and look through your kind comments and questions.
All right, guys, you are going to wrap this up this evening. So I want to thank you all for taking your time. I know you put a lot of work into this presentation. So thank you very much. And I will see people next week. This small town girl is going to talk about small town Europe. And these 3 lovely people are going to take it away tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you on Monday when Cameron comes back to join us.
Thank you.
Good night, Gabe. Good night, Emily. Good night, Lisa.
Good night, Gabe. Good night, Ben. Good night, Emily. Good night, Ruth Ann. Good night, Emily.
Good night,
Good night, Lisa.